Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Zephyr Metaphysics 101. We're happy to have you here again. If you're tuning in for the first time, welcome. And if you're returning from our previous episode, welcome back. Just to give a little recap about what our episode from last week was all about, it was titled, Who or What is God? And some of the things that we touched on, and I'm not going to give an entire recap of everything we touched on because that episode is available for you, and we love to have you listen to it if you have the time. But just some of the basic fundamental things that we touched on was exactly who or what is God. And one of the things that I was sharing with you, which was one of the primary topics in the episode, is something that the man whose school of metaphysics I grew up in shared with us, Dr. Henry Clifford Kinley. And after Dr. Kinley had his experience, his spiritual experience, he started that school of metaphysics, as I said, and as I shared last week, that I grew up in, that my parents raised me in. And one of the things that he endeavored to get across to us is our relationship to the Creator, if you will, and just our connection to that one we call God. And so one of the things that he brought out and that he would endeavor to get across, and that my immediate teacher, Dr. Harris, the man who Dr. Kinley placed over the school and who eventually took over the reins of the school when Dr. Kinley transitioned in February the 9th of 1976, he shared with us that the one you call God or the Creator is the absolute source, substance, limits, and bounds of everything. And he said, now, when I say that, you hear those words and they sound impressive. God is the source, the substance, the limits, and the bounds of everything. And he'd say, now, don't exclude yourself. And he'd go on to elaborate on exactly what he meant when he said that God is the source, the substance, the limits, and the bounds of everything. He said, now, when I say that God is the source, that means everything visible and invisible comes from him. You see, there's nothing that you can see with your finite senses, with your five finite senses, or anything that belongs to the invisible realm that you cannot comprehend with your five finite senses. That does not emanate from the one you call God, Yahweh, or the Lord, or Allah, if you will. So he said that source is picking up the fact that everything derives or emanates from him. He said, now, when I say the substance, what that means is that everything visible and invisible is made up of him. So that means that not only does everything come from him as the source, but because he is the substance of everything, there's nothing that you can see with your five senses or that you cannot see from the invisible realm that's not made up of the one you call God or Yahweh or the Creator or Allah. Would it just take your pick, you see? And then he said, now you got source, substance. And then he go on to say that the Creator is the limits and the bounds of everything. So not only does everything come from him, not only is everything made up of him, but he is their limits and he is their bounds, meaning nothing can go beyond him. You see, and I'm using that pronoun him, and I know, let me just stop right here and clarify that. We use these little pronouns and people get caught up on that. Right now, today in the world, people sit up and argue about whether or not the Creator is a man or a woman. And I can tell you that's just downright foolishness at best. And we're going to get into that in another episode about this whole business of male versus female. And is God a man or is God a woman? First of all, spirit is genderless. You see, there are no male angels or female angels running around the invisible or astral plane, you see, or the kingdom of heaven. There are no male female angels running around the kingdom of heaven, you see, identifying as male versus female or transgender for that matter, or any of the earthly things that we identify ourselves by in our ignorance. You see, those type of pronouns and those type of identifiers belong to this lower realm, you see. And somebody say, well, I read about Michael and Gabriel and Raphael and Uriel in the Bible, you see. And those names may seem to be male gendered names, but they're really not. Matter of fact, to all of those names, especially Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, there are female variations of those names. So Michael is not an angel that identifies as a male in the heavenly realms or in the invisible realms. You see, Gabriel is not an angel that identifies as a male in the invisible realms. You see, there are no genders in the spirit. That was one of the reasons why, when they came to the Messiah and they asked him, and they were all, when I say they, I'm talking about the Pharisees and the Sadducees in the scriptures. And they came to him and they said, there was this woman, and they put this kind of parable before him. And they were always trying to trip him up, hoping that he wouldn't be able to answer them. So they came to him one day and said, well, there was this woman, and she had 7 husbands, and the husbands were brothers, because under Hebrew law, if a woman's husband had died, she could legally marry one of his male relatives as long as she didn't have a son with the husband that had died. So they go to him and say, hey, Emmanuel, or Yahshua, although they didn't call him Yahshua or Jesus, they called him Emmanuel. They said there was this woman who was married to 7 men, 7 brothers. And the one brother died, leaving her no child or no son. And then the next brother died and leaving her no child or no son. And then the same thing happened to the next one, and the next one on down to the 7th one. So this was their question to him. Who's going to be her husband in the resurrection? And he just kind of looked at them and said, silly rabbits, tricks are for kids. When they shall rise from the grave, or when they shall resurrect from the grave, they shall not marry, neither shall they procreate, but they shall be as the angels which are in heaven, which neither marry nor procreate. Now, I know you have those who follow after the doctrine of Emanuel Swedenborg, and I like Swedenborg. I've read a lot of his material, you see. And he does talk about people having spouses and all of that. But what you have to understand is, when you speak about heaven, the Bible speaks of 3 heavens. The Bible speaks about the first heaven, the second heaven, and the third heaven. So when the Messiah is talking about when they shall rise from the grave, they shall not marry, but they shall be as the angels which are in heaven, you have to understand that there's 3 different heavens that are mentioned in the Bible. So you must know which heaven are you talking about, you see, because in the first and the second heaven, you may have something that resembles earthly marriages. But in the innermost heaven, which is the one which all of us on this plane, or not all of us, but many of us claim that we aspire unto, you see, there are no physical marriage, or there are no marriages that resemble physical marriages like we have on this lower plane, you see. But I don't want to get off into that right now, because I could take a whole lot of time and go over that. I want to get back to what I was saying. And the point is that we have always looked at the creator in his creation. We've looked at him in the universe. We looked at him in the galaxies, the solar systems. We looked at him in all the various kingdoms on this planet, the animal kingdom, the bird kingdom, the plant kingdom, the insect kingdom, all the different kingdoms in this creation, in this visible physical creation. And we say that's an expression of God. But yet when we get to ourselves, we always exclude ourselves. And I was thinking about that, and just ruminating and just kind of sitting back and wondering why that is. Now, firstly, it's like that because of the way we come into this world from our mother's wombs. We come in, you see, with what Paul termed a carnal mind. And it says in the scriptures that the carnal mind is at enmity with the things of the spirit. So we are not able to penetrate past the 3 veils of visibility to see our true identity. And as a matter of fact, Dr. Kinley put it like this. He said, now, when you were born, he said, now, I'm not playing the dozens. And for those of you that don't know what the dozens is, it's an old Southern game, a game that kids used to play when they were younger. Maybe they played it in other parts of the country or the world as well. But I know a lot of kids in the South played it. And when I was growing up, they also played it out here on the West Coast. And basically what it is not necessarily a game. It's just kind of basically trash talking each other. And when you play the dozens, I will say something like, your mama's so stupid, she got locked in a grocery store and starved to death, you see. And you say, no, your mama's so stupid. She got locked in the bathroom and peed on herself. And that's playing the dozen. That's how you play the dozens. They call it the dirty dozens, you see. So Dr. Kinley put it like this. He said, now I'm not playing the dozen, but when you were born, your mother didn't know who you were and your father didn't know who you were. So they named you whatever your earthly name is, Robert or Sam or Elizabeth or Mary or John or Joseph, whatever your name is, they named you that. Now, when you came forth, they didn't say, oh my goodness, look at this little expression of God in human form. Oh, isn't she so adorable? Oh, isn't he so precious? Now, they didn't say that, not because they were trying to hide the truth from you. They didn't say it because they didn't know it. Because not only did they not know it about you, they didn't know it about themselves, you see. And the fact that your grandparents didn't tell your parents that about themselves, again, they weren't trying to be facetious and they weren't trying to hold back the truth. It was because they didn't know it. And neither did their parents and their forebears know it, you see. So we come into this world with a certain level of unawareness about who we are and about who our creator is. And one of the problems is, I think that when somebody tells you, and this is the reason I started last week's episode off the way I did, because one of the biggest problems, and this is something that Neville Goddard tries to get across in a lot of his lectures, for those of you that are familiar with Neville, and I'm sure many of you who are listening to this probably are. If you're not, he's a wonderful metaphysical teacher, just as Dr. Kinley was. And he talked about his spiritual experience, just as Dr. Kinley preached and taught his, just like Emanuel Swedenborg talked about his, just as Emmett Fox talked about his, and Joseph Murphy and all these other metaphysical teachers, and Emily Caddy, and so many others in our present time. Well, not necessarily in our present time, but in the last 100 years or so, if you will say. Many of them are gone now. They were kind of around in the late early 1900s. But one of the things that Neville tries to get across in many of his lectures is understanding when you say God, what are you talking about? Because a lot of times when you tell people that they are God and they say, no, I'm not God. And a lot of religious people don't like for you to say that because they feel like it's blasphemous. They think that they are ascribing unto themselves a certain level of humility when they say that I'm not God. But then all in the same conversation, if you ask them, and I was bringing this out last week, if you ask them, well, what is God? Who is God? They can't really give you a decent answer, you see. Now, you have people that'll come along and after men like Dr. Kinley and Neville give you an answer, then they'll kind of put their own spin on that. And some might even, after they heard me say what I'm saying now, they might come along and put their, now I'm just repeating to you what Dr. Kinley said. But they'll come along and say, based upon, what they've heard others say, well, this is what God is, you see. But they really don't know or understand who or what God is themselves. And so my question is, if you don't know what God is, and I'm not trying to speak in things, but if you don't know what God is, how can you say you're not God? You understand? It's just like if you ask, what example can I use? If you ask someone who does not know what country they live in, they don't know that they're a Canadian, let's say, and they're, young, never left the country, maybe 5 or 6 years old, maybe 7. Even at that age, they should know what country they live in. But it's possible that in their young ignorance, they don't know. And you say, oh, that little boy right there, or that little girl right there, they're Canadian. They say, no, I'm not no Canadian. And you say, well, yes, you are. And they say, I'm from Vancouver. And you say, well, Vancouver is in Canada. And you say, no, I'm not no Canadian. And you say, yes, you are, dear. And they just insist on the fact that they're not a Canadian because they are from Vancouver or they're from Toronto. And you try your best to explain to them that Toronto or any other country, Ontario or what have you, those places are in Canada. That constitutes you as a Canadian. But because of the verbiage that you're using, because you didn't refer to them as, I don't know what Toronto people call themselves, a Torontian or what have you, or a Vancouveran, because you didn't use that verbiage, then they insist that they're not what you're calling them. You see, and you can use the same thing. I can say, you may say, this little boy, he's an American. And you say, I'm not an American, I'm a Texan. You see, and you tell him, well, yes, we know, but you're an American also. I'm not an American, I'm a Texan. And then you have to explain to him that Texas is in America. It's in the country of America, you see. So when we talk about understanding who or what you are in your relationship to the Creator, and people get so defensive and say, I'm not God, because they have, number one, in their mind, they have a certain image of what they think God is. And most of the time, their image, you see, and their imagination about what God is that he's a Zeus-like figure, more than likely a Caucasian man that sits on a throne somewhere high above in the atmosphere, you see, and innumerable miles away above of the earth, you see. And that one day, if they're really good, they're going to be teleported there if they earned it. I heard a very popular YouTube minister talking about, you know, one of the first things he wants to ask God is about his aunt and uncle, you see, and that type of thing. And that he's going to sit down with God when he gets to heaven and ask him. Now, first of all, and I'm not trying to be nasty, I mean, there's a death every 22 seconds in this world. There's a birth every 11 seconds, so life exceeds death, but there's a death every 22 seconds. Now, even if you want to say, maybe half of those people are headed to heaven, for the kingdom of heaven, that would be quite a reservation list to get in and sit and talk with the Creator. Now, again, I'm not trying to be nasty, but we don't even think about these types of things. What type of appointment do you need to make when you get to heaven to see God? You see. And then if the streets are paved with gold, and I don't want to get off on a tangent, but if the streets are paved with gold, who has to clean those streets? Because with all that traffic going on, again, I'm not trying to be mean or arrogant. I'm just saying we have these carnal, earthly interpretations about what we think heaven is and what we think the Creator is. And it's based on our earthly mentality, you see. Now, one of the things I think that might help, if you're open to it, is using maybe a different adjective. Because maybe if I say God is eternal consciousness with a definite shape and form, or God is eternal awareness with definite shape and form. And what I mean by that is that he's not a homogeneous blob of nothingness. And I hear people say he's an energy field. God is an energy field. Now, are you just an energy field? Surely the spirit that animates your body, it's energy in shape and form, but it's not an energy field. It's energy with a definite shape and form to it. And you can't be something that the Creator is not. Because again, going back to our original conversation, if he's the source, the substance, the limits, and the bounds of everything, if you're trying to get beyond him and say, I'm this, but he's not this, then you're making yourself something that the Creator is not. Or you're saying you're something other than what he is. If you were made in his likeness, in his image, that means whatever he is, you have to be that. You understand? So if I said to you, you are eternal consciousness in a definite shape and form, and that form is a form of a human man. And when I say man, I'm not talking about male or female. I'm talking about male and female. Man is male and female. He's not male or female. Man is male and female. You see? So you are eternal consciousness or eternal awareness. Would you be okay with that? Would you maybe consider that? And you say, perhaps. And if I said to you that God is eternal consciousness or eternal awareness, would you be all right with that? You say, perhaps, maybe, Elijah. So therefore, I could say that you are God. Somebody say, no, see, I was with you for a minute. When you said that I'm eternal consciousness, that was fine. When you said that God is eternal consciousness or eternal awareness, that was okay with me. But then when you say that I am God, you lost me again. Well, wait a minute, let's go back to the beginning. If I say that you are eternal consciousness or eternal awareness, is that okay with you? All right, that's fine by me. If I say that God is eternal consciousness or eternal awareness, is that okay with you? That's fine. Is it fair to say then, let's slow it down a little. Is it fair to say then that you and God are the same thing. No, I can't go along with that. I can't go along with that, Mr. But why? I just asked you if you believe you let's break it down a little further. Do you believe that you are spirit? How about we take it like that? Do you believe at the core of the essence of who you are that you are a spirit being? You say, yes. I know that this body is just a covering, you see, and I know that it's not the reality of me. I know that it's not the real me. I know that I have a soul or a spirit that animates this body. Now, everybody ought to know that. There's not any man, woman, or child that have existed on this earth plane for at least 5 or 6 years that does not know, you see, that they had a birthday and they have a death date. You see, a little child that gets cut, he runs to his parents or her parents and says, Mommy, Mommy, I'm bleeding. Because number one, they know that the blood is supposed to be on the inside of the body. And that if the blood is not on the inside of the body, it could be fatal for them. They know that it could be detrimental. They may not understand all that encompasses, but they know that it could be dangerous for them and it could be something that affects their life adversely. They understand that, you see. And when you and I've been going to funerals and memorial services all my life. I'm in the process of helping plan one right now for my younger brother who passed away a little over a month ago. And you and I know that when we go to a funeral, if we go to a funeral, now not necessarily a memorial service, because oftentimes at memorial services, the physical body is not there. The individual might have been cremated or something like that. And so they might have their ashes present, they may not. But at a funeral, typically with a funeral, the body is present in a coffin. And if they decide to do a viewing the day of the funeral, you might go, or the day before at a viewing, you'll go up there to the coffin and you see that individual, that loved one or that friend or that person that you were familiar with in this life. You see them laying there in the coffin, you see. And you might see family members, you see, come up to them and in some cases, you see, they're very emotional, saying, oh my goodness, they're gone. They're gone. They're not gone, are they? Not physically speaking, because physically speaking, the body is right there. So who or what is gone? Well, they are confessing either knowingly or unknowingly, wittingly or unwittingly. They are confessing that there was something more to that person than just that physical body. Because if you're sitting there crying about the fact that the person is gone, and the physical body that you were familiar with is right there in front of you, laying in the coffin, then what's gone? And perhaps for some of us, for the first time in your life, you might give some real consideration to the fact that there really is more. You might have said it before, yes, I have a soul. I believe in a soul. I believe in a spirit. But for the first time in your life, you might really have to consider now that there really is something that animates these bodies that I cannot discern with my five finite senses, you see. And if you're a religious person, you might call it the soul or the spirit. You see, if you're a non-religious person, you might call it energy. That's fine, you see, because energy is, to me, that's a scientific way of saying spirit. Spirit is a spiritual way of referring to the scientific term of energy. You could say matter or spirit, you see, because matter is nothing but spirit materialized, you see. So if we can agree on the fact that you are spirit, and you say, all right, I'll go along with you on that I'm really in my core and at my essence, I am really spirit. Okay, we agree. Now, in the Bible, over in John 4:24, it says that Elohim is spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and truth and in truth. And then over in 2 Corinthians 3:16, it says that the Lord is spirit, and where the spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. And then over in John 14:6, it says, but the Comforter, which is the Holy Spirit, whom the Father shall send in my name, shall teach you all things. So let's examine this. When we talk about the Lord, it says in 2 Corinthians 3:16 that the Lord is spirit. Where the spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Over in John 4:24, it says that God is spirit, and where the spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. And then over in John 14:26, it says that the Holy Spirit is spirit. So in every state that the Creator exists in, he is identified as spirit. And yet, you're also spirit. Now, understand, it doesn't say that God is, you have to take that A out. That should not have been inserted in there when it says God is a spirit. God is not a spirit. God is spirit. Because if you say that God is a spirit, you see, as it says in the King James version of the translation of John 4:24, God is a spirit. That's not correct. Because if you say God is a spirit, what you're saying is that there's another source. So you have to render that God is spirit, you see. And where the spirit, and even scholars will tell you, it should not be an A put there. Shouldn't say God is a spirit. It should say God is spirit, because there is no other spirit. Because when you say that he's a spirit, you're saying is God, what you're translating that is God is a source. And God is not a source, he is the source. When you say that God is a spirit, you're saying you're translating that as God is a substance. God is not a substance, he is the substance. When you translate that as a, you're saying God is some limits, some bounds. He's not all the limits in the bounds. He's a limit and he is a bound. No, he is the absolute limits and the absolute bounds. So again, God is spirit in each of his three states of existence, or the Creator is spirit in each of his three states of existence. And you're also spirit. So if you have the Creator being spirit and your spirit, and we agree that the Creator is not a spirit, he is spirit, you see, then you should be able to start to bridge the connection of your relationship between you and him. And let me just put it to you like this, maybe simply, because I want to wind this up. When we're talking about the one that the world calls God and mankind, all you're looking at is a difference in intensity. In the Bible, it speaks about different types of angels. The Roman Catholic Church, they came out with something centuries ago called the celestial hierarchy. And they speak about how there's different variations and degrees of angels with certain levels of awareness. And the highest, they call them angelic choirs. And those are different groupings of angels. Now, what is that really all about? You see, and by the way, see, Dr. Harris put it like this. He said, there is no celestial hierarchy. He said, there are orders in the spirit. And you have different orders of angels. And each order of angelic choirs have a different function and a different job that they carry out according to their order. And the highest, if you will, order, you see, or the most prominent order is the seraphims. And that word seraphim means the burning ones. Now, they're not called the burning ones because they're burning and being consumed by anything. They're called that because of the intensity that the spirit is operating in them, you see, and the way that the intensity of that energy or divine substance is moving in them, you see. They are referred to as the burning ones, you see, and the brilliance that they give off from beholding, as it were, the face of the Creator. And we'll get into what the actual face of the Creator is in another episode down the road, but it's not what you think it is, you see. And then after the seraphims, you have the cherubims. And then after the cherubims, you have the thrones, you see, and then so forth and so on, dominions, powers, virtues, you see, and it goes all the way down from there to the archangels on down to the angels. But all that is different levels of awareness, see, eternal spirit beings operating from the highest to the lowest with different levels of awareness or consciousness, if you will. And that is determined by the vibration and the rate of speed, see, that vibration is operating in within them, you see. So from the highest on down up to the seraphims, on down to the angelic, those that are just called the angels, on down to creatures like you and me, there's only one source operating. The difference is the intensity at which the source or the vibration at which the source is moving. It would be almost like if you liken it unto the pitch, you see, that opera singer could give, you see. And if the opera singer could bring forth a certain, which they do, bring forth a certain vibration. That's why you've seen those videos where they might have an opera singer sing at such a high pitch that it breaks the glass, you see. And depending on how high the frequency gets, you see, they are able to break that glass. Now, when they're singing at a lower vibration, you see, it's the same voice, same opera singer doing it. But because they're singing at a lower pitch, they don't break the glass. But when they sing it at a higher pitch and they go higher and higher, eventually they can break that glass with the pitch of their voice. So you have all of creation from the highest to the lowest coming forth from the self-same source, self-same substance, self-same creator operating through and through, you see. But the pitch is what determines, you see, the manifestation that comes forth. The seraphims operate at a certain pitch, you see, of the divine sound. The thrones operate at a certain pitch, you see. The cherubims operating at a certain pitch, you see. The dominions and the powers and the principalities are operating at a certain pitch. The archangels and the angels are operating at a certain pitch, and mankind is operating at a certain pitch. But it's the self one operating through and through. The source and the substance of those that are called seraphims are the same source and the substance of those that are called archangels. And the same source and substance that operates through those that are called archangels is the same source and substance that operates through those that are called mankind, you see. Because man is nothing but an angel covered over with flesh and blood. And an angel is nothing but a man without flesh and blood. That is not limited to flesh and blood, you see. So if you can begin, and that's why I titled this channel Zephyr Metaphysics 101, because you have to get a solid foundation of who and what the creator is, as well as who and what you are. And you can begin to appreciate that relationship between the creator and his creation as really the creator manifesting as the creation. Because if he's the source and the substance of everything, who else could manifest as the creation? There was no other source to go to. There was no other substance to turn to. So he had to assume the role himself as being the source and the substance. And if you can understand that when we say spirit, if I say everything is spirit, I could really just say that everything is consciousness. Or I could say everything is awareness. So now you still may not agree, and it's fine, and you won't agree. Because let me just say this. You see, the thing that has to happen to every last one of us is that we, as the Apostle Paul put it, become new creatures. Now, when Paul said that we had to become new creatures, he wasn't saying that your outward adornment has to change. You see, the word repent really means a radical change of attitude. And the attitude that the Creator is looking for us to change, you see, is that self-same prayer that the one we call the Messiah prayed. And it wasn't the so-called Lord's Prayer, give us this day our daily bread, you see. It was, Father, make them one as you and I are one, you see. When the Messiah came along, you see, and he spoke to the men and women of his day, he asked them, for which one of my works do you seek to stone me for? They said, for a good work we stone thee not. But thou being a man, maketh thyself Elohim, or God. He said, is it not written in your law that I have said that ye are gods, and all of you are children of the Most High? The main contestation that they had with him is that he would dare call himself God or the Creator, you see. But he knew that's who he was. He knew that there was no other source. There was no other substance. There was no other limits, and there was no other bounds. So therefore, I have to be one with that. I can't deny my Father. I can't deny my source. The problem is because you are still operating with the mind of the five senses. You think that your physical mother and your physical father are who you are, failing to realize that they are only a type and a shadow and a physical example of who your true spiritual parents are. So I will not deny my Father. I will not deny my source. You see, because if I denied the source, if I denied eternal consciousness and said that it's not my source, I would be a liar like you. So a source, another name for source is father and mother. So when he said I proceed forth from the Father, he was saying, I proceed forth from eternal consciousness. And because I'm an expression of that, I call myself the Son. And when you know that you are an expression of eternal consciousness or eternal awareness that men call God, you see, then that makes you a son or a daughter, if you will. But we use the term sons, biblically speaking, but there is no gender involved in this, you see, because we are really at the core of who we are. We are spirit beings, you see, and really and truly the creator is both masculine and feminine. You see, he's Father God and he's Mother God. So whether you say God the Father or God the Mother, it don't offend. See, me and you on this lower level, we argue about foolish things like that. You see, because we're still caught up on our pronouns and we haven't identified the noun. Before you can talk about a pronoun, you must first identify the noun. And the noun is spirit. That is who you are and that is what you are. But I'm going to end on that, folks, because this video has gone long enough. Thank you so much for coming and listening. I really, really appreciate it. I hope you come back again. And eventually we'll set up something so that people can ask questions, those who have questions. And if there's something that you want me to touch on or go into, like I said, I know we're going to have many people that disagree and call me everything but a child of God. But you know what? That's okay with me. I'm in good company, you see. And at the end of the day, if you feel like you have something better to share with people, you're always welcome to start a YouTube channel yourself and share it with them. You see, you don't have to sit up there and tell me how wrong I am. In a matter like this, it seems like to me the best thing to do would be to start a channel and start sharing yourself. If you feel like it's that important. I felt like it was that important, so that's what I did, you see. So anyway, thank you all who came in to listen, and we hope we'll see you, hear from you again, and see you again on the next episode. Bye-bye.